This video consists of an excerpt from Gnostic Sunday School number 8, Decoding Vesica Pieces. I thought it would be useful as a standalone video.
Yeah, that did it.
So in this short presentation, I want to take a look at Pixar's award-winning animated short, Piper, as a Gnostic allegory. We see symbolically an awakening from a dream world, or an awakening to the nature, dreamlike nature of reality. We see here Sandman's sand in your eye. Symbolically, the Sandman has visited this small bird, and now we're going to see some symbols that map onto the idea of the spiritual pearls and shells. Also, first-hand experience, or Gnosis, being encouraged by the mother, but then this small little bird gets a little too much too soon. And before I say too much too soon here, perhaps let's switch gears with an esoteric juxtaposition. I want to talk about a Jonathan Franzen approved author of short fiction. He's also a novelist. His novel, The Ice Storm, was turned into a film. I haven't seen that or read the book. I did read Demonology and The Ring of Brightest Angels Around Heaven, as well as Joyful Noise, a book he edited, which is short fiction inspired by the New Testament. And he writes in the introduction here, it was novelist Jonathan Franzen who suggested to me the beauty and mystery of the parables, which I'm taking up here. My reading is informed by his model and by an interpretation I first encountered in a sermon by the rector of Grace Church, Brooklyn, Reverend Nil Blatz. So we have Jonathan Franzen opening up the parables. The scales are falling from the eyes. We're talking about Saul becoming Paul, the falling scales.
Exactly 100 years ago, the U.S. government passed a groundbreaking law to protect migratory birds that fly across the Atlantic. To mark that anniversary, National Geographic magazine helped to declare 2018 the Year of the Bird. And it kicked off the observance with an essay from acclaimed author Jonathan Franzen, who is also a bird lover and a conservationist. In the middle of the country's biggest metropolis is an urban oasis for bird lovers, even on a chilly late winter morning.
Some visiting relatives came with binoculars. We went out into the park.
It was a similar experience 18 years ago that changed author Jonathan Franzen's life forever.
They're peering into this tree, and there's this incredible, brightly colored little warbler sitting in this tree that I'd passed literally 500 times, and the scales had fallen from my eyes. There was this other world.
So this is a nice fractal. We have the scales had fallen from my eyes, Franzen says. There was another world. There was this other world. So we have a bit of a fractal of Gnosis here, where Franzen is waking up to the beauty of the birds and has a type of spiritual experience that's rather Gnostic. And the way he describes it, it gets kind of, kind of spiritual, I'd say. And in Piper, we have a bird having a Gnostic experience to the beauty of another world. And here we have this little guy, as we showed him before. He kind of is inclined to stay in bed, doesn't want to wake up from the dream, or is waking up to the dreamlike nature of reality. In fractal form, he wakes up from a dream into another dream and then sees the dream for what it is in the too much too soon events aftermath, when he learns how to behave like the hermit crabs do. So we have that giant wave hits him. Well, not much of a wave at all. Giant for him, though. So he's quite frazzled, and then he goes back out there and he observes some hermit crabs who seem to have no problem with the water coming in. So the little Piper's alarmed this guy's not in worse shape than he is. He's surprised to see that he's doing just fine. So this hermit crab, from whom the Piper is learning how to survive the incoming tide, functions like a transitional being, a transitional symbol, going between one world and the other, the ocean and the land, right on the cusp. And that intermediate place is the Vesica Pieces symbol, which is a part of this larger presentation, which this shorter presentation is embedded in. So we'll go over the Pythagoreans and the overlaying circles representing the coming together of spiritual and material planes, among other things. But here we have that Piper doing what the hermit crabs do, and then he has this experience here where he goes through a bit of a baptism. We could see this baptism as a kind of Gnostic ritual as well. The water is a vehicle for the kind of like a passage, a rite of passage, or a rebirth. So aside from the Vesica Pieces of the crab and the transitional state of the beach as two worlds coming together, we also have the waters above coming down and then receding. So that's more biblical symbolism. And that's also the spiritual waters above. That would be the type of baptism that John the Baptist describes as Christ providing. And we have the hermit crab here. The crab is also this symbol for the zodiac of Cancer, and we think of Cancer as someone maybe has cancer, or they're confronting physical death, so they're transcending a limitation, which is also limited here. The Piper, after his first encounter with too much too soon information, or a brush with death, or a close encounter, so symbolically he sees the other side, but it's in a traumatic way. The hermit crab is a transitional being, a nomadic being, and then we have the yin-yang sign of the 6 and 9 in the Cancer. And then we have Jimi Hendrix here. So what does he have to do with all that? Well, he asks us in his debut album, Are We Experienced? And then he begins his second album, Axis Bold as Love, with EXP, suggesting perhaps he is now fully experienced. And in this, we have the famous song, If 6 Was 9. And I'm thinking of the 6-9 zodiac sign of the crab, and the both ways, the yin-yang, up and down, and also the coming together of the two worlds, making the Vesica Pisces kind of crab-shaped shell. And then we have the transitional state of the beach right here as the waters above, and then the horizon line and then the land below. And we have this bird experiencing something like a Gnostic experience with some sort of spiritual realm above, or the waters above. And you don't have to believe that there's a firmament keeping out water above in the skies or heavens. But that ancient Jewish and ancient in general, many cultures had a kind of flat earth or dome covered sphere at the center of the world, a kind of geocentric view of the world. And if we think of that, then we can go on to decode the poster here, which is kind of interesting. So you can see here on the poster for the film and the cover art for the packaging, Piper is enamored with this dome bubble on the surface of the beach, and we see all these smaller, similar dome bubbles surrounding it. And I'm reminded of that ancient Jewish view of the firmament-covered earth. Interesting, the Werner von Braun, Nazi turned NASA rocket scientist, references Psalm, is it 119 that references the firmament? Showeth his handiwork. Anyway, it's helpful to understand that geocentric firmament-covered Earth model, similar to the Ptolemaic model of the universe that was in effect and useful for quite a long time. To understand symbolically here the mythopoetic symbolism and the symbolic references. So you don't have to believe in a flat earth or a dome-covered earth in order to see the symbolism and how that functions there. You could believe in a simulation, you're in a game. Player A lives in a dome-covered earth, the other is on a spinning marble in an infinite vacuum of chaos and expanding into cold nothingness. They're both kind of crazy, if you think about it. Hey, take a look at Piper there in the title. You'll see Bible kind of upside down if I just extract those letters and flip them and invert them. And there's your bubble earth, the flat earth model. Paul Chieft, I believe, did that computer animation there of that firmament model, and that's keeping pretty close to the old and ancient models. There was a number of models that were similar to that one. Some had globes that were stationary and covered with a firmament all around the globe, and others had a flat dome-covered earth with maybe something like an underworld, which would be that the underside of the earth. And you see here when we take a look at the kind of ellipse of that circular earth from an angle, which is a bit of an optical illusion. It's a circle, but we see the ellipse. It looks like a Vesica Pieces there, right in the flat earth in the center of that kind of bubble. So sorry to burst your bubble, but there's more than meets the eye here, and that's kind of the experience that Piper has. And the inversion of the Piper name is the Bible. So we have something like a hidden Bible symbolism, a kind of Gnostic take on the understanding of the world as a bit of, well, I see like a dreamlike nature of reality, and I also see that there's a whole other level of beauty. Also pointed out here earlier in the graphics, but not too obvious, as the stars in the waters above.
As when we came upon a pair of owls.
The owl is sleeping, as far as I can tell.
So awesome. Oh my God, this is so awesome. This is the best Valentine's Day ever.
Did everyone hear that? Alex just said best Valentine's Day ever.
I mean, what's better than seeing two owls in a tree? There are some birds that are just, everybody wants to see them, but they really certainly don't disappoint, do they? Wow. Oh my God, this is so awesome.
Okay, they're going to be there for a while, so I want you to look at the red-shouldered hawk with that beautiful red chest and the white stripes in the tail. Are you on it? Look at the thing and then bring the binoculars up.
Yep, I see that. It's so great being able to really see them. Oh, I saw the stripes. That was amazing.
Yeah, and they also have beautiful black and white patterns on the
Wow.
back and wings.
It's moments like this that made Jonathan Franzen fall in love with birds.
And because I'd fallen in love with them, I wanted to help them.
So early on in his interview, Jonathan Franzen used language that went back to chapter 9 of the book of Acts, when Luke is describing Paul's Gnostic awakening, essentially, where he struck off his horse and he encounters God. He has a vision and hears things, and he's never the same. Also, I'm reminded here when Franzen says that he had fallen in love with birds and he wanted to help them. So there's kind of this fractal of expanded levels of compassion and forgiveness and love and action. So here we have the symbol of Saul becoming Paul reminds me of King Saul from the Old Testament, who was handsome and powerful. And then we have the diminutive Saul, who is infirm and old and not the best looking guy, and he's chosen to spread the good news and basically the gospel around the Mediterranean. And his name is Saul as well before he converts during his Gnostic experience. So I'm kind of reminded of this Jewish concept of reincarnation, that we have Saul, the mighty king of the Old Testament, reincarnated in this Jew that is well learned in the Torah and actively persecuting Christians across the area. And until he has that experience in Acts 9, Jonathan Franzen uses language to harken back to that experience when he talks about seeing this level of beauty and falling in love with the birds and being aware of this entire level of reality that existed right on top of his own, right outside his window, that had just gone on right by for years, unknowns to him. And this awakening was like the scales had fallen from his eyes. So he uses the biblical language. And the scales falling from the eyes reminds me of the scales of justice, as well as the scales of something playing out on the level of a fractal. Like I said here, we have this bird awakening to the beauty of the waters above in the heavens. And then we have Jonathan Franzen awakening to the beauty of the birds. And so we have this kind of fractal of experiences of God's creations all experiencing each other and experiencing God. And it was a humbling experience for Paul to see the Christians as not only humans, like the Jews, but actually the ones with the superior spiritual message, because it turns out that Paul was wrong and Christ was the Messiah. So his Gnostic awakening in Acts 9 that was referenced by Jonathan Franzen is this awakening to this humbling to the fact that these people that he saw as less than human turned out to be the ones that were the truth. And he knows it instantly. And the scales falling from the eyes is the language Franzen uses. And now he's a crusader to help the birds, much like Paul was a crusader to help the Christians whom he had been persecuting. And so these are fractals. Jonathan Franzen writes novels. They're not as impactful as the New Testament letters of Paul. And it would be nearly impossible to write something as impactful because the world doesn't function like that anymore. However, maybe if something cataclysmic or supernatural happened, people might take a particular book quite seriously and start a movement. Anyway, what we have here is fractals of experience using biblical language and biblical symbolism. And we have that biblical symbolism and Gnostic symbolism in the story of Piper itself. So Pixar has done a nice little short film here. In under 10 minutes, they show this little bird going through this experience. And I also wanted to point out that the Vesica Pisces symbol here functions like that crab shell as something that can leave the body, especially in that hermit crab symbolism. We have something that is temporary, and the shell is thrown off like a husk. So what is immortal and what is perishable are separated. And they're separated right there at the ocean, which is that transitional state. So there we have some interesting symbolism. Rich with symbolism is the ocean itself, and the tide coming in and washing away the sand in the dream, waking up from the dream, entering into the nature of another dream. And so we have the fractal of the awakening. We have the fractal of love. You fall in love with the Christians. You fall in love with humanity. You fall in love with God. You fall in love with yourself. You fall in love with the birds. You find something to take action about and something to help. And just as you have done it to one of those, so too have you done it to Christ, as Christ has said in the Gospels. And so the children, the little creatures, the persecuted, they are being watched, and so are you. Keep that in mind. And yeah, that's a nice little Gnostic tale there. So let's get back to the larger teaching of the Vesica Pisces, though. That was just kind of a little aside that I found interesting. And so to wrap that one up, we'll go back to Jimi Hendrix, who was asking on his first album, are you experienced? And after you have the experience on the second album, Bold as Love, Hendrix has found love, something to protect. And he has had the experience if 6 was 9. So he's ready for the inversion if he finds out, the hippies cut off all their hair. And there's also the story of castles made of sand. So we have the preparation for if 6 was 9. Is Piper a story about a little bird, or is it actually a Bible story, perhaps? We see that name undergoing the inversion, and then we find out that the waters in the ocean might be symbolically the waters above. And Piper is having something not entirely unlike a near-death experience or a life after death experience. And he learns that from the crabs, who are symbolically the Cancer sign, which has that 6 and 9 up is down, ready for the inversion. What if I was wrong symbolism. And we have the Vesica Pisces, the intersecting of two worlds, or the combining of the flesh and the spirit, and what happens when those two cleave and then separate. And that's the transitional period of the sand and the beach, and the two worlds of the ocean and the land coming together. And we also have on the beach there the horizon. So we have the waters above in the heavens coming together with the ocean, or the horizon line, the waters below. So that is an interesting and symbolic place where we have a life after death experience. And the crabs are transitional beings. They don't have castles made of sand. They're ready to pick up and go. They'll move to another shell. And so this idea of the temporary physical body, but the immortality of the soul, was something that was around in Greek and Hellenized thinking Jews in that transitional period. And the Essenes and the Jewish mystics would have been thinking the same as the early Christians. The divine, sovereign, individual righteousness of the human, and the idea of the inherent kind of worth of the individual, and the immortality of the soul was a big part of that. So the body dies, the soul lives on. This little bird lives through that symbolically and sees the world differently. So he gets like a new lease on life. Then he's running up and down the beach, spreading the good news. So, it's kind of like what Jesus and his disciples were doing throughout the Gospels. So there you go, fractals and infinity in a grain of sand, as William Blake suggested. Okay, so I'm done rambling about that. So there you go. You have the two worlds combined. The waters above. We got the ocean and the beach. You got the bird and the crab, the transitional being, teaching this bird how to take flight. And then he's ready for the inversion. Instead of flying up, he's a bird. He digs down into the ground and hunkers down, and things are a little different. And so what if you learn, oh, you're already dead and you're in the bardo, and then you're going to be reborn? Well, that would be crazy, right? So anyway, take it from Jimmy. 6 might be 9. Pictographically, icons, they're identical. Things could be different than they are. You have to be ready. But you know what you love, you know what you love. And the details, you can spin those around and change them. But anyway, that's it from me. So yeah, Franzen loves the birds. Paul loved the Jews and the Christians alike. And God loves all of you. And spreading out that fractal of empathy might be one of the lessons here too. Seeing the world differently, loving the birds, or loving something. Doesn't have to be birds. For me, I actually had a similar experience to Franzen a few years ago. So I get it. I get it with the birds. Anyway, all right. Thanks for coming out. Good night. God bless.